New Brunswick and other parts of North America experienced a major heat wave this week, with temperatures in Moncton, for example, reaching a high of 34 degrees Celsius on Tuesday with a humidex of 44 degrees. Amid these sweltering conditions, the group NB ACORN has launched a campaign demanding AC for all. The group is calling on all levels of government to create programs that ensure low-income families have affordable access to cooling in their homes. Ahead of rallies in Moncton and Fredericton, NB ACORN co-chair Peter Jongeneelen was hospitalized for heat exhaustion. He told the NB Media Co-op that his lease bans window AC in his apartment. For more on the AC for All campaign, the NB Media Co-op's Lucas Reynolds spoke to NB ACORN chair Nichola Taylor and Sawyer McNaughton, a member of the group.
First of all, how are you affected by this issue? Do you have air conditioning in your home? And if not, how are you coping with the heat?
I do, so I'll let Sawyer answer that.
I do have air conditioning in my living room, but that is more so for the sake of my pets because it's not safe to have either of them in the levels of heat that we get. I live on the third floor of an apartment building that is definitely not insulated to keep cool air in. But my bedroom is not in air conditioned by any stretch of the imagination and regularly gets several degrees hotter than it is outside. So you can imagine what yesterday was like. I ended up sleeping on the couch. Air conditioning didn't do a whole lot for me anyway.
No, absolutely. I think in the report you mentioned how there's some of the places that do have air conditioning, a lot is just one room that's air conditioned or two.
Yeah, exactly. Our living room is air conditioned for the sake of our animals, and my roommate's bedroom is air conditioned because he works from home. If he didn't have it, he'd be in a similar situation that to the one he was in last year, where he very nearly got heat stroke a couple of times and had to call out to work, love work, just because of the level of temperature in his bedroom, which is his home office.
That's very interesting. Can you talk about that relationship between work? Are people, in your experience, taking off work because of not having AC?
Yeah, many of my friends work in retail or in work from home positions. So retail is a different story. That's more so to do with whatever the building is able to do. But when people are working from home, such as my roommate and my best friend, you do frequently end up in positions where people are having to make the choice between their livelihood and their health because not having air conditioning in the place where you work can be actively dangerous, especially with temperatures reaching the highs that they have in spaces that are not built to accommodate cooling.
Absolutely. Um, this report mentions how heat can negatively affect health, sleep, and daily life. Would you say that you've been experiencing this? I mean, you slept on the couch. I'm guessing that's uncomfortable.
Yeah, I would say I experience that like every summer. I mean, as a personal anecdote, I'm on medication that I'm on SSRIs, which I know most people I know are on some kind of medication of that sort. And when a person is on SSRIs, they become much more intolerant to heat. So temperatures such as the ones we've been having are actively more dangerous to me and many people in my same position because of the things that we need to be able to function in our day-to-day lives.
It also affects people who have respiratory illnesses and heart disease. And we've seen a lot of that in New Brunswick, but also across our membership in Canada as a whole. And of course, it affects seniors because seniors aren't able to regulate body temperature as easily as younger people. And we actually saw the impact of that in the heat dome that took place a few years ago in BC. The coroner's report actually showed that the majority of people who passed away were seniors, and those seniors were low income or on fixed incomes living in rental buildings. So this kind of thing shows just how much tenants are disproportionately, especially low-income tenants, are disproportionately affected by climate change, especially when they have no access to cooling in their apartments.
Absolutely.
Can you speak more on those demographics? Are you seeing differences with the Acadian population or immigrants or any other cultural differences there?
Well, yes, in a way, because they're more vulnerable so there is a list out that says like people who are on low income families, Indigenous people, people with disabilities, seniors, and newcomers to Canada all are vulnerable to this. And, you know, whether it's energy poverty or climate change that's affecting cooling, or there's no cooling in the apartment, sorry, it's all interlinked, right? So we've seen that, and that is why we are campaigning heavily on both affordable energy, but also as part of that is the cooling systems in people's apartment, because it's all linked and it's all related to climate change when all said and done.
Absolutely. Can I bring back to your air conditioning? Did you have to install it, or was it actually installed by the landlord?
No, we did have to install it ourselves. The way that our building is set up, we do not have in-unit air conditioning as a feature of the building. Both units that we have are portable air conditioners that we had to set up and like create the window installments so that they were able to be used. We like the way that our windows are structured, we don't have that like small thing that you can oftentimes mount like a wall air conditioner on. So all of that is on our own dime with our own time, and we pay our power bill separately.
Wow. And have you noticed this talking around? Is this common that people have to install their own air conditioning? And do they feel pushback from their landlord for doing this?
I mean,
Yes.
yes.
Go ahead. I was going to say that, yes, most people have to either install them themselves or the landlord refuses to let them install them. And that's what we're seeing right now. They don't like the window ones for some reason. They claim that if they're not installed properly, they can, you know, fall out. But they are not actually willing to do anything about it. So, you know, tenants are stuck between a rock and a hard place. And either they're worried that the landlord will use this against them, or they're worried that the landlord will say, that's okay, you can have an AC unit, but you need to pay me more. And we see that happening as well.
Absolutely. Some landlords also seem to have a bizarre problem with uniformity in the external appearance of the building, and that is also partially why they have an issue with window-mounted air conditioners, which makes extremely little sense and is just incredibly cruel and like borderline violent to the people living under their roof.
Have you talked to these landlords? Have they proposed any other solution to this? Because, I mean, people need to be cooled, especially in these hot days.
Landlords because they see that it's cost out of their own pocket. So they're not going to install them if they're having to pay for them. And even the ones that are saying, you can't have a window one, you know, they may allow those stand-up units that you can get, but that's at the cost of the tenant, as Sawyer said. Sawyer's had to pay for their own AC. So landlords are not prepared to pay for the AC. And then what we're also worried about is if these kind of retrofits we want these retrofits in buildings, we know that they benefit tenants massively, as they would landlords as well. However, what we're worried about in that case is that the landlord will actually pass those extra costs onto tenants, and we have seen that across our membership, also across ACORN Canada. So it's a very fine line, and as we all know, landlords are very creative in how they get their money, and you know, how they can you know, be against tenants. That power imbalance is there in all aspects of tenant-landlord relationship.
I'd ask about that creativity with landlords. Are you talking about rent eviction, or is something akin to that, or is there something else that you?
It can be anything. So yes, it can be part of the renovation. We do have a slim renovation law here in New Brunswick now, that came into place in the summer of 2023, where that if a landlord wants to renovate an apartment, he or she has to get the approval from the landlord-tenant relations office. However, it can't be for cosmetic reasons. So installing an AC would not be a reason to evict a tenant. That would be against the law. But it has to be something that means that that apartment is unsafe or unlivable for anybody. So we do see them trying to get around that using other methods, such as moving in family members, for example, and then trying to get people out that way. And sometimes threatening behaviours. And if you're a vulnerable person, you know, who's afraid, or you're on low income, fixed income, this is quite intimidating. So these kind of things we want to stop. But so there is that way of getting around it. But also, even for like now, there's a rent cap in place that's set at 3%, and that's looking to continue. However, they will find other ways to get tenants out, whether that's fixed term leases or whether it's going around this renoviction loophole. So we really do need to tighten those kind of things up. And I believe they will, and probably have done in the past, used AC and installing AC as a reason to try and evict tenants. You know, and it's just unacceptable, because everybody, just like in winter, everybody has the right for heating and to be warm in their apartments. In summer, everybody has a right to live comfortably with an adequate cooling system, especially when we've seen temperatures like yesterday, for example. And as Sawyer said, it gets incredibly uncomfortable to live in if you do not have that cooling system in place.
Speaking on that uncomfortability, one of your organizers, Peter Jongeneelen, just got out of the hospital for heat exhaustion. He told the NB Media Co-op that his landlord had a clause in his lease stating that no window AC is allowed in their unit, as we talked about earlier, likely for similar reasons. Can you comment on this? Is this actually affecting other members of your leadership to that point?
Yeah, well, especially him, because he already has underlying health conditions as it is, him and his fiancée. But what's really disturbing, they've been tracking their temperatures since the beginning of June. And even when it was 17 degrees out, they were tracking the 27-degree temperatures in their house or in their apartment. And like Sawyer mentioned earlier, when people, they work from home, or they used to work from home, and that office became very uncomfortable for the both of them, to the point where his fiancée now goes to the office because, you know, she doesn't want to work from home when it's that hot. And yesterday we had high temperatures. I believe it was around 35 degrees, and they recorded temperatures of 40 or higher. And he began to feel really ill. He called 811. And they sent an ambulance straight away, and he ended up staying overnight with heat exhaustion. He was allowed out this morning, and he wasn't able to attend the rally because he was still recovering from that. He's better, but he's very tired. And again, this brings us back to, if people have medical conditions or need medication, and the heat affects them greatly, this can be extremely dangerous for people. And it's just unacceptable that landlords would refuse tenants AC when they heavily rely on being cool during the summer. So it is a human right. It's a fundamental human right, really. And, you know, that is why we launched our campaign today. And we recognise that tenants do need this kind of programme in order to feel comfortable in their own homes. So that's what we're calling on the government for.
Peter's wonderful, and the fact that this happened to him is just so indicative of so many failures on many levels of infrastructure, and I just hope that he gets well soon.
Yeah.
Can I ask, how do you think the rally went? Do you believe it was successful?
I believe so. Like I personally attended the Moncton rally this morning. We had very solid turnout, like very high energy, very like committed members all there. Many people spoke about personal experience. We actually had a couple of people from the building that we were in front of come down and talk to us about some similar issues they were experiencing in their own homes, some issues related to like rent eviction and like treating them very poorly, the tenants that were there on subsidized disability housing. So we had like started a lot of very important conversations, had a lot of good interactions with the public, and just generally, I think it was a very timely way to get the word out about the campaigns that we're launching and the work that we're trying to do to make sure that nobody has to live another summer this way.
The same in Fredericton. We had a smaller turnout because our membership's not as big in Fredericton. However, we still had, a couple of press hits from that, talking about how important this campaign is, talking about the dangers that we've just spoke with you for people who have health conditions or seniors or even somebody who's healthy. This is not acceptable, right? So I just want to stress that as well. And, the fact that it's always low-income people who have to suffer these kind of things before anybody is taking any action. It shouldn't be that way. So that is why we use our voices to champion that and to come out and say this is wrong, because we want to see better changes and better systems put into place. We all know that climate change is affecting all of us, and all of us are affected by it in some way, shape or form, and to deny it, it's just nonsensical. So the fact again that low income tenants are disproportionately affected more than anyone else by climate change because of poorly maintained buildings, whether it's insulated poorly, old appliances, drafty windows and doors, and then lack of adequate heating or cooling systems. It's just unfair and unjust on another level entirely. We do see programs that homeowners have access to, such as they can get the heat pump, for example. These do not exist for tenants, and they do not exist for apartment buildings. So that has to change also, because everybody has the right to live in comfort and in peace in their own home. And to discriminate like this, which it's discriminating against low-income people and not allowing them to have this kind of cooling system in their apartments or heating in winter. It's just wrong on so many levels. And I think if we don't do something about it now, like Sawyer said, this is so timely that's happened, because if we don't do something about it now, the summers are only going to get hotter and hotter and hotter, and we're going to end up with another crisis on our hand or another catastrophe on our hand, like we did 2 or 3 years ago with the BC heat dome. And that's something we want to avoid completely.
Absolutely.
When it comes to air conditioning and the climate crisis, it does seem there might be a vicious cycle where energy consumption linked to air conditioning may contribute to climate change. Any comments on that? Are there any alternatives that don't involve more energy consumption?
Well, this is where we have to ask our governments to turn to green energy and also, to have these kind of retrofit programs where they are cutting emissions down, because we all know that we will all benefit from these kind of things. But while the government, whether federal, provincial, while the government is still investing in fossil fuels or, things that damage our environment, we're not going to get anywhere. They need to invest in a program which is clean, green energy, such as wind, such as solar, etc. And we need them to invest. The federal government has a target, and I'm not sure what that target is exactly, but they have a target to cut emissions. And they can do that by introducing these kind of green retrofit programs into apartment buildings, just like they're doing with home ownership. And that is what ACORN Canada is asking the federal government to do, so that energy efficiency and mechanical cooling requirements are in all projects, and they apply to mandatory building performance standards with tenant protections. So, there are solutions. They just need to want to put them into place. And it's our job as NB ACORN or as ACORN Canada to push the government in that direction so that they do take it seriously.
I certainly agree with absolutely everything that Nichola just said. I think there can sometimes be an expectation that the public and the individual is expected to do everything that they can to lower their own personal emissions, while the government and while large companies are allowed to get away with using dirty energy scot-free, like causing massive amounts of damage to our ecosystem, while everybody is incredibly hung up on the small and minute ways in which the individual person contributes to that damage in the world. And while I think that everybody should strive to reduce their own emissions, there's also only so much that one can do when they are poor and struggling and beaten down in so many ways, and just trying to not sweat to death in the summer, trying to not freeze or overheat, and be extremely harmed by the way that the world is constantly being heated up by large corporations, large companies, and the government recklessly investing into those things for short-term gain. So, Nicola's very much correct.
Thank you.
You've sort of spoken around this. If you could speak directly to policymakers, what would you say they are actually failing to understand? Actually, what should be their takeaways from this?
I think the green energy is a big one, right? You know, we hear a talk of there's going to be a new gas plant around or outside of Moncton. You know, I mean, this is all also linked to NB Power and the money that they're putting into, you know, the dams and all stuff like this. You know, they need to invest and look into green renewable energy, and that is something that we feel very passionate about. Again, these kind of green retrofit programs will benefit everyone. Energy poverty programs need to be extended nationwide. And if we are to eliminate emissions, like Sawyer said, it's not each individual. Of course, we have to do our own bit, but nobody's holding these big companies or corporation or big financial landlords, or even the government to account here. And that's what our job is, to do that. So that is a big worry. It's a big concern. And that is why we are pushing for that kind of thing. But also these kind of green retrofit funding that we are really pushing for across the country, and especially in New Brunswick, they have to introduce this kind of thing so that tenants are living very comfortable, living in a place where they're not feeling like they dread the summer, or they don't want people to come over. Something very simple like that. How can you entertain your friends, your family, if you feel that your house, your apartment is like an oven? You can't stand it yourself, so why would you have other people there? Something so simple like that, and people don't think of it. It affects every single part of the life. And, you know, that is why we feel very passionate about it. And the government has to take a look at it from all angles, not just the costs, not just money. This is people's lives, health and well-being that we're talking about. And we all know how important all of those things are.
Yeah. Low to moderate income people make up the huge swaths of the population. And I think when policymakers and those people at the very top are in a position of privilege where they don't understand the sheer amount of damage that this causes and just how much of a person's life dealing with these things actually affects, I think it's incredibly easy to be blindsided by short-term profits and turn a blind eye for that reason to the suffering of their constituents and the people that they are responsible for. I think there's just been an ongoing irresponsibility for years upon years to look at something that seems like it can keep infinitely growing and using up a finite resource and damaging the world, instead of actively acknowledging the plight that people are struggling with every single day. I would just implore anyone in power to take a very good long look at the people that they are meant to be helping and think about how many of them thread the summer every single year and what it is that they can do about that. And I think that the plans that ACORN is suggesting and everything that we're trying to push for in government, and the ways that we're trying to get the word out to the average person, is something that I'm very glad to be a part of. And I really dearly hope that those who are making the policies in our province will start paying attention to.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
You've spoken on corporate landlords, these big institutions. What would you say to someone who owns a building, rents it out, but maybe doesn't have that fund or amount, and they are really struggling to make ends meet. What would you say? Should they also be forced to install AC? Is that just a requirement of having a place to rent?
But this
I
is
think
where
so.
the AC, oh, sorry. But also this is where the AC for All program works, because if we took this model from British Columbia, right now British Columbia have a system in place called AC for All. We took the same title. Our ACORN officers out there in British Columbia. And basically the government there subsidize ACs for free in people with either medical conditions, and they'll get a note from their doctor to prove that they're eligible, and then they can apply. Of course, they'll have to talk to their landlord, but it's at no cost to the landlord. So then they'll apply for this, and the government will agree or not agree. As long as they've got the evidence, it should be fine. And also, this program's for seniors, because again, we're going back to the fact that so many seniors died in the heat dome a couple of years ago, and they were all, or the majority of them, sorry, not all, the majority of them were from, rental buildings. So what we want is the same program. Now they're now trying to expand it to all low income earners. And from the get-go, we're saying all low-income earners should have access to this kind of program. So the government, whether it's provincial or municipal, they should work together to devise such a program to help people. And also, they should remove all barriers that landlords refuse. So, for example, you can't have one in your window or whatever. All those kind of barriers should be removed. So if this program is, or if our campaign is successful, the program itself, if it's implemented, means it's at no cost to landlords. So if it's a mom and pop landlord, so to speak, they will be able to let their tenant have this kind of AC for free, and it's no cost to them, and it's at no cost to the tenant. So it's a win-win, really. So that's that suits especially those kind of landlords. But I would say, on the other hand, if you can't afford the upkeep of your building, and you can't afford to install AC or try and find a way, around that. And no one's talking about heat pumps now. We know how expensive heat pumps are, but if you can't even have the money to install a simple AC unit in the apartment, then perhaps you shouldn't be renting out apartments in the first place.
Yeah, I will say, like any landlord has a responsibility, if they're going to be providing housing, to make sure that it is livable housing. And if a building is going to get that unbearably hot in the summer and somebody can't afford to install an air conditioner, it's just kind of to be expected that I don't think you should be renting out that building. That's not a safe or livable building. Renting and being a landlord is an investment, and there are sometimes just things that you cannot make true on an investment. You might just have to let that go.
Right. That's how it stands. Why are you renting? Why are you renting if you can't afford the upkeep of that building? And the upkeep means keeping your tenants safe and comfortable, whether it's through the winter or through the summer.
Yeah, you take on a very important responsibility when you're providing housing to anybody, no matter if they're family or if they're just a tenant to you. There are many things that you have to keep in mind. Can't be bugs, can't be freezing cold, can't be burning hot.
Right.
You spoke about how you're adapting this from a British Columbian policy. Why do you believe the New Brunswick government, or the feds for that matter, have not already taken action and copied it?
Because we haven't seen it. It's as simple as that, right? So we know that the feds, again, have a target on emissions. And there are, on the federal government, there are some green retrofit programs or funding. And we're pushing them to make sure that they are affordable and have anti-eviction covenants. And that formal tenant participation in these retrofit plans is extremely important. because, you know, often the tenant is left out in all of that. And also signed community benefit agreements involving tenants, landlords and funders, as well as proof of benefit. Landlords must demonstrate that retrofits tangibly help tenants financially or make the unit healthier to live in. Now, we had an incident in Alberta where the bank, CIBC, they have a green retrofit program and the landlord can apply for it. And they did. However, they didn't do anything. So they didn't use it to put aircon in or heat pump or whatever. They did nothing at all to make those buildings energy efficient. And then what they did was charge the tenants or give them a rent increase of, depending on the tenant, between $400 and $900 per month. That's what they expect. That was the increase that they put on tenants. This forced so many tenants to be displaced and they had to find somewhere else to live. ACORN stepped in and we fought hard and we actually won. We got a meeting with CIBC and we told them that this is unacceptable. They cannot have these kind of green retrofit programs if the landlord is not going to carry out the retrofits, and also if they pass the cost onto the tenant, it's just unfair. So CIBC did put in covenants to protect tenants. However, it wasn't retroactive. So all the tenants who had previously had to leave or were affected by these huge increases were still affected by them. But going forward, that program should not put tenants in any risk of displacement, and that is what we're asking the government to do on their own government-funded green retrofit programs.
Well, thank you so much for speaking. Sort of to wrap up, how can the public support this campaign beyond being present at the rally? We
do have an online petition that we've shared today with the photos from both actions in Moncton and Fredericton. So people should sign that, most definitely, and so that the government, the provincial government here in New Brunswick, know that this is something that people want to see. And, you know, by coming out and supporting us at our events and rallies across the summer, we're going to be out doing a lot of outreach this summer at various events, and we'll be holding other rallies as well. So, you know, it's a great way to get in touch and to come and speak to us. And also, if tenants are experiencing the same issues that Sawyer's talked about in their building, and what Peter's talking about in his building, where the temperatures are so hot, then we need to hear from them. So they should reach out to NB ACORN and share their stories, because we really want to hear from people who are experiencing the same issues.
Absolutely. I mean, NB ACORN has an Instagram page, a Facebook page. We meet the second Tuesday of every month on Zoom. So just keeping an ear to the ground, getting involved, talking to your neighbors, making sure that you're aware of the issues that are going on in our world. And you know, if you're able to chip in, talk to us, tell us what you're going through, we'd really appreciate it. We'd love to help.
Thank you so much. Well, I've been speaking with NB ACORN Chair Nichola Taylor and Sawyer McNaughton, who is a member of NB ACORN. Thanks so much for joining us today. For the NB Media Co-op, I'm Lucas Reynolds.